Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babbling Eyes video with myself, Mike and Sloth today. Championship playoff final tomorrow night as you're watching this, and we thought it's only right that we give our top 5 championship player picks if we could pick some to sign for West Ham this summer. There's obviously a lot more than this list and we'll give a few bonus ones at the end, so make sure to stick around. But these are just a selection of the talent that we've basically identified from the championship that we feel would be a very smart move for West Ham to make, because we've seen, in the last few years, the championship talent is getting higher and higher, and you can really find some fantastic players from the championship, as Jad Bowen has proven to many West Ham fans over the last 4 years. So, Mike, we're going to start with your first pick. Hull City captain, Jacob Greaves, centre back. Talk to me about Greaves and why you want to sign him so much for West Ham this summer.
Yeah, you find that Sloth's going to be very enthusiastic about this one as well. This is a player that since we've been running this channel for 2 summers in a row, we've had him in our scout list. And had I had the time to do it this year, he would have been in it again. Basically, he is such a flexible defender. He can play in the back 3, can play in the back 4, plays as a centre back, can play as a left back as well. He's actually come on quite well as a left back in his time at Wolves at Hull. Really good with the ball at his feet, calm and composed defender. I think he has 2 goals this year and has 4 assists as well. He's just a really composed defender, and Hull obviously been a team that have been coming on leaps and bounds this year, been so good in possession, really entertaining team to watch, and he's been a part of that. And he's been there since they've been a League One team, made his breakthrough season in their League One season, and has made the step up really well and really easily into the EFL. At 23, now is probably the time for Greaves to get out of the Championship. Had they been in the playoffs, I think that would have been great to have seen Hull come up because of the football that they played last year. I think they probably would have been someone that most neutrals would have probably rooted for in the playoffs. And Greaves, as I say, as a defender, is a defender that I like. He can play with the ball. You could argue he's fairly similar, quite similar to Aged, however, physically much stronger than him. And yeah, it's just a defender I like, and someone that I think that wouldn't necessarily be a starter in the short, maybe even to medium term, but over the long term, should he develop just like as we've seen with Bowen, and I think we've got Bowen around about 23, 24 as well. Yeah. It's the right time to get a player just as they're on the cusp of really starting to coming up towards their prime years, and then I think this is the right time to get him.
Sloth, what's your thoughts on Greaves?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Mike said. I think he's fantastic. This Hull side is one that I think was really unlucky not to get up into the Premier League, into the playoffs. But Greaves was a big part of them pushing to even try and hit those spots. And I think it's not just his maturity and leadership, him being the captain. It's also the fact that he's more than happy to do a job. If you ask him to go left back, he's going to do it. He was even playing at left mid at some points in the season. Not much, but he was happy to help out there. And I think that speaks volumes about the player. I think if he were to come to West Ham, as Mike said, he wouldn't necessarily be a starter straight away, but I do think he's got all the minerals and attributes that are needed for him to really bed himself into the starting 11. And he's not just got the physicality, the height, he's got a good turn of pace as well. And he does like going into a challenge. He doesn't pull out. He goes in hell for leather, and I think that's one thing that
robust. I think
really. That's it. Yeah, very articulate.
He's very much. When you think of what David Moyes' defenders always were, like the types like the Jagielka type that he would have brought up from the Championship, he fits that mold. He's a robust centre back. He isn't necessarily the broadest, but he has a good physique. He is very strong in the air, likes to tackle, and he tackles strongly and looks to engage, has a good level of aggression. and he also has those finer touches as well with the ball at his feet.
Yeah.
Obviously, the pace will be slightly different in the Premier League, so there will be a level of adaptation. However, I do feel that he is at the stage where he's ready for that step to move into the Premier League.
Interesting. Well, let's move on to our number 2 pick. Not necessarily in order of preference, but this is more of someone that, you know, is an obvious pick. He's performed fantastically. He was player of the season in the Championship last year, and that is obviously Somerville from Leeds. He's been fantastic for them in the Championship this season. Leeds, again, it depends on the playoff final tomorrow when you're watching this, and how they get on against Southampton, but he could potentially still be in the Championship by the time this weekend is finished. So, Sloth, I know you've spoke about Somerville quite a lot as well on your Twitter and stuff, and you know it's definitely a player. I think everyone, it's kind of obvious to what type of talent Somerville is and what he could bring to West Ham, especially with the way we want to set up under Lopetegui. So, do you think he would be a fit at West Ham for how we want to play under, as I mentioned, under Lopetegui?
I think he'd be fantastic. He's the ideal left winger for that sort of system. And you know, we've seen him. One of the interesting things in terms of this list is that Somerville's actually one who's done it in the Premier League, and you know, he went away, scored against Liverpool for Leeds while they were in the Premier League. So we know he can cut it at this level. I think it was a bit of a surprise to everyone when he stayed at Leeds, and he's absolutely torn up the Championship. I think his pace, work rate, and finishing ability in this Lopetegui system, whether it's more sort of counter-attacking or looking to just exploit pace, use those wings and ball carriers that we have on them, I think he will be a huge asset to whichever team he goes to.
Yeah, 100%. I think we've mentioned, you know, that left wing position is something we are crying out for, you know, going into this summer. And I think it's something we're trying to identify very quickly with the likes of Wesley, who again is young as well. Yeah, I mean, he's still only 22 years old, Somerville, so plenty of room to develop, plenty of room to learn. But he's, as you say, he's got all the attributes to be a fantastic player. And you know, looking at his statistics for this season, he's done fantastic. You know, 19 goals, 9 assists. In 43 Championship games, which is a very good return for someone that isn't, you know, a natural striker. He's more than that. So, yeah, I think Somerville is the obvious pick. Back to Hull, Mike. Another player you like is obviously called Jaden Philogene, another attacking player. So, yeah, what can you tell us about Philogene, and why would you be looking to maybe potentially bring him to West Ham this summer?
Yeah, it's another one that Sloth and me both have a lot of love for. Yeah, he's incredibly skillful to the point of he has scored a couple of Rabana goals, and not from kind of an angle where you would say he is in the advantage. He scored them from quite acute angles, and he's got very good pace, incredibly good feet. And the thing that we were waxing lyrical with Wesley, he likes to get players 1v1. He likes to take them on. He's very direct. He will either go inside and outside. He likes to commit players, and he's the type of player that will get you on the edge of the seat. He's the epitome of what West Ham like to see. It's, like, you know, for lack of a better term and no disrespect, but it's like a Mo Kudus light in the sense of he will want to receive the ball. He will want to commit the defenders consistently and constantly. You know, he is probably going to have to improve his decision making. I think that's you know, without a doubt. But he is a young player who has come on leaps and bounds this year, and has been one of the big reasons why Hull have been so good this year, because he's been so effective in counter attack play, but also when he does get the ball, he's so dangerous that he causes chaos. He causes the defence to have problems and to be consistently looking to kind of double up. And when you have players that can draw that level of attention, it is only going to create space. And when they're able to then find and pick that little pass, that's when you can truly exploit. And if you have a player with that level of pace, that level of confidence that we've seen this year in him, then it is only going to be that whenever you get the ball, teams are going to naturally sit a bit deeper against you, because they're going to be fearful of the likes of Bowen, Kudus, Philogene. You never know what striker we're going to get. If you've got players that have that level of pace, even if we sit slightly deeper, there's always going to be in the back of the mind of teams. If they counter us and they beat our press, we're in trouble. So it naturally means teams don't necessarily push up as high on you, and it means it creates more space. So I think it's that type of player that will excite the fans because of his ability, the way he likes to play. And it's also great to see a player that plays with a level of freedom and, I guess, a maverick element about them where they like to do tricks and flicks and do the unexpected. And that's the kind of thing that personally I like to see. And it's something that we maybe see less of in football nowadays, with players being cultured is now the term.
Yeah.
But I think having a player that plays on the cusp is something that West Ham fans will always kind of gravitate to.
Sloth, if you could pick between Somerville and Philogene to sign for West Ham this summer, who are you taking?
It's funny because they're pretty much my two top picks in the league. I think, look, if I'm going off what we need, it's Philogene, because we need homegrown players. If I'm going off just output alone, I think it's probably going to be Somerville. I think he'll be double the price. There is this clause that Aston Villa have for Philogene. We should say his name is Philogene Bidace. He switched about halfway through the season, so we must address that. But he has this buyback clause from Aston Villa where if they bid £15 million, they can buy him back. However, if another team comes in for him, Hull aren't obligated to accept Aston Villa's fee. They can accept anything over that. So I think you have a much better chance of getting Philogene Bidace at a lower cost than you do Somerville. And I think if we're addressing this Paqueta situation and the sheer amount of work we need, maybe the smart move would be for Philogene Bidace this summer. But then again, if Leeds don't come up, who knows? I think my head says Somerville, my heart says Philogene Bidace, because I just think he is absolutely electric on the ball.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, so much towards the modern game now is systemized footballers, and we're seeing less and less of the types of Philogene Bidace in the game. So yeah, I think it would be a great addition as well, and it's something we naturally are going to need over on that left hand side.
He'd be exactly what West Ham fans thought or were told Ben Warmer was going to be. But he's quicker, he's just as skillful, and I think he's
I really do like Somerville. I do sometimes get that slight vibe that this season that he's had is very much similar to what Danjuma had for Bournemouth the year they got promoted and he went to Villarreal. For me, it has quite a few parallels as to how he played. So it'd be interesting whether Somerville is very good. If he can translate that when he goes back up again, if he goes back up, can he bring that level with him? Because we saw in his last season in the Premier League, it was flashes in the pan, and we've seen him really do it really well in the EFL, which we've seen Danjuma do. And that's the one thing that sits in the back of my mind with him, is that I've seen Danjuma do that brilliantly in the EFL, then did exceedingly well for his first season at Villarreal, and then since then he's kind of more flattered to deceive when he's been in the Premier League. And that's my one reservation with Somerville. I think he's got more about him than Danjuma. I think he's mentally, I don't want to say more stable because that's disrespectful, but what I mean is I think he's
more switched on.
Has a calmer output. So I think he's less combustible as a player, and I think that probably would serve him well should he come back up. And it wouldn't necessarily go the kind of flatter deceive route that we've seen maybe with Danjuma since he's come back to the Premier League.
Right, pick number 4. This is more of my shout, and it'd be interesting to hear your guys' opinion on this because we haven't really touched on it. But Ben Sheaf of Coventry, I think he's been fantastic for them this season. And yeah, I think it's interesting because he used to play for West Ham, obviously for like the under 18s, way back in 2014. So he is 26. He's a bit on the older side compared to a lot of these players on this list. I just think if we're looking for that Declan Rice-esque player to come in that's going to be, as I mentioned, homegrown is a massive thing for this summer. Someone that's going to be fairly cheap to get done, I would say. And yeah, I just think he is ready-made for the Premier League. I think I saw him, against Wolves. He was the standout midfielder in that game, completely bossed the game. Even in the FA Cup semi-final against Man United, he was outstanding. That's not much of a feat these days when you look at the Manchester United midfield that comes out, but he was fantastic. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think Sheaf for me would be a very smart move to make, especially if we're moving on Flynn Downs. And we've got so much to build for this summer. I think someone like Sheaf, who I feel like is ready to just slot into the Premier League, and I don't think he would look out of depth at all. I think he's a little bit more ready-made than some of the other players potentially, and he's playing in a position that's, again, we've got Edson Alvarez. We know he's not reliable when it comes to staying away from yellow cards or red cards, and also his physical ability in the Premier League isn't always the best. I know we're going to transition into Lopetegui and hopefully have more of the ball, etc. So it'll be less demanding, but I just think Sheaf would be a really good option. So yeah, what's your guys' thoughts on Sheaf from Coventry?
Interestingly, when we did our list last year, we had a long list as well as the ultimate one that we ended up putting out. Ben Sheaf was one of the players on it. He was, with Harmer, probably the strongest midfielder, one of the strongest midfielders in the EFL last year. Obviously, Hamer was the one who got brought up to the Premier League with Sheffield United. And yeah, he was brilliantly defensively, incredibly strong defensively, in possession, incredibly comfortable as well. Interestingly, if we were, say, to get to Europe next year and we did bring in someone like Ben Sheaf, not only does he qualify for homegrown, but it'd also be a club-trained player because he's with us from the ages of 15 to about 18. So he would also qualify as a club-trained player. So he does also have that added benefit for us should we get European competition when he was signed. So it's one of those ones, a bit like Grady D in Ghana, that whilst it's not necessarily fancy, it's one that could serve us well in terms of our overall needs in which to manage things such as club trained potentially in the future, but also the homegrown element now. And we say he is a very tidy player. And at 26, it's a decent age if we're going to be bringing him in. Then bringing him in maybe for the likes of Flynn Downs would make sense. However, I think I would prefer Potts given the chance ahead. But that's just personal choice.
Sloth, what about you?
Yeah, well, I think this is probably one of the only positions where I think there is definitely better value out there in Europe. I think the Championship is incredibly strong, but this centre midfield area, I think there's probably, you can go out and for, I don't know what kind of price Coventry would maybe be looking to get for him, maybe around £20 million. But I think you can get a wrecking ball of a centre mid from across Europe for that sort of money. And I just wonder if even someone like Hayden Hackney might be a little bit of a better option. It's definitely something that I think is kind of counterweighted by that academy product element. And yeah, I would not be against it. I think his defensive attributes and his physical game overall, he's really impressed me, especially in those cup games. I think the whole Coventry side can really stand with their heads held high, and I think quite a few of them will be on the move this summer. I just don't know if he's the one I'd target.
Callum O'Hare is another one where you could.
I'd be looking at their right back. I think he's a very big talent. But for me, I think if it's a case of certain sides give up their European place and we somehow manage to squeaky sneak our way in through, then yeah, definitely for the academy bonuses, I think that's a good buy, a good sensible buy.
Last player on this list before we go on to our little bonus picks at the end is someone that's been at Southampton for a while now. So again, it depends on how the the playoffs go this weekend, as opposed to whether he'll be in the Championship or not next season. But he's a little bit older, obviously 27 years old now, and that is obviously Kyle Walker-Peters. He's played in the Premier League before. We know exactly about the type of player he is. Very versatile in terms of can play left back, right back. Looks like we've lost Mike there, but I'm sure he'll be back. We'll continue. So yeah, I know stuff. I know you've mentioned Kyle Walker-Peters' name, how many times. So yeah, what would you be looking at when it comes to Kyle Walker-Peters? Is this one where the ship sailed, or would it be smart business, given that Ben Johnson's likely to be leaving, Cresswell is the age he's at, and we just don't really have that that strength in depth in the fullback positions?
I think it'd be a very smart deal, particularly if we're open to putting Flynn Downs as part of it as well, because let's face it, fullback is probably our weakest position. As you say, he has the versatility to play both sides, so he can be a great addition in that sense. And I think that with factoring in the fact that Soufal may potentially be off, we don't know, but Johnson, Soufal, a big summer of change. You want someone who knows the league. And I think it would be potentially a deal that you can maybe write off the majority of the financial side just by potentially sending them Flynn Downs. So I think it's a great shout. He's not necessarily the wing back I would be signing if it was my ideal pick. But I think for,
to be fair, your ideal pick is utter chaos at right back. I know which one you really, really want. He is utter chaos.
But no, it's one that I think would be very valuable in terms of building a squad. And as we mentioned, the fact that he can play both sides, that's massive.
Yeah, exactly. I think this list of, there's so many good players in the Championship. We could have picked 15, 20 players from this list. So maybe if you could just give one name each that we haven't mentioned on that list that we could maybe add in here as a little bonus at the end before we wrap things up. Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Slough has already said his name, but Hayden Hackney is someone that we talked about last year. It hasn't been his strongest season, but having said that, it's not been Middlesbrough's strongest season. But he is a good, strong runner, ball carrier, very energetic, very good box-to-box type player. And at the age, I think he's now 22, 23, he definitely think that he's probably, if he was in the Premier League, we will be talking about him as a Scottish international. And I do think that he does have the attributes to be a good player. And again, a bit like with Greaves, not a player that will come in and be a starter. However, given the right kind of tools in which to succeed, he very much could be a player that pushes to be an important player, much in the vein of, say, like a Jordan Henderson. If I was going to try and pick a player that he could be similar to, in terms of his,
don't really want that.
No, but he created balance in the midfield that allowed an attack to flourish. Sometimes it's, as we said about Atalanta, it's not about those fancy names. The players like Darun at Atalanta was derided for his time in England and was felt as not much of a player, but has gone and been an absolutely epic player at Atalanta. There are these players that are not fancy, that maybe don't fit profiles that people want to see. However, they are at times almost integral to get you to play in this very specific way. And I think Hackney's one of those players that maybe will not excite people. However, the fact that he's so highly functional, or can be highly functional, is a player that can facilitate a team to play open and progressively.
Slough, who's your bonus pick?
Well, I mean, people are going to tell me that the last thing we need is another left-footed right winger, but I'm going to pick one anyway. I think it was really close between two. Asprilla at Watford, who I think is a sensational talent and someone that I think is going to kick on light years. I think he's fantastic, and he was just beaten to the post by Whittaker at Plymouth, because I think as a homegrown talent, someone who has played across the front line this season, but similar to Somerville in certain degrees, has been scoring for fun. I think he has been fantastic and could well be someone that maybe has the chance to play up top. I think he would be a really smart signing. Plymouth financially probably would be open to a good 15-16 million pound offer for him, and I think he'd want it as well. But yeah, he's really impressed me this year. He's 6'1", so you know he's going to have a physical edge that a lot of strikers don't have, but also he just looks cool and composed. And I think his work rate, he may well find it a bit of a challenge to come up from League One into the Championship as he has this year and repeat that again into the Premier League. But I think if you're looking at rotating him in, bringing him off the bench, I think that's a really valuable asset.
Well, there you go. There's our picks. As we mentioned, there's more on this list, but these are some of the ones that we'd like to maybe see West Ham go for this summer. Some smart ones, some slightly more ambitious ones, and then yeah, somewhere we've got some left-footed right wingers coming in, according to Slough. So yeah, let us know your thoughts on these players, and if there's anyone we haven't mentioned, we'd be happy to interact in the comments as well down below. So yeah, make sure to leave a comment, leave a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and yeah, until next time, lads.
Come on, you
On your
Irons.
Irons.